Deep within an obsidian heart lies a secret that has been protected for a lifetime. We break through the hard exterior to find the pulse of humanity that still beats within the darkness. Hit subscribe now and discover the secrets hidden in the shadows.
The smell of pine and cinnamon hit me before I even opened the car door. My mother-in-law had strung lights along every rafter of the Caldwell Lake House, and even from the gravel lot I could see the warm glow bleeding through the tall windows out onto the snow-dusted dock. It was the kind of scene that made you feel, for just a moment, like everything was going to be fine. My son tugged my sleeve. He was 6 years old and wearing the navy blazer we had stayed up past his bedtime pressing the night before, the one he called his important jacket, because I had told him we were going somewhere important. He had asked me 3 times on the drive whether his hair looked neat. I had told him 3 times it looked perfect. "Mom," he said, tilting his face up toward me, "is everybody already inside?" I looked at the cars in the lot. My brother-in-law's truck, my husband's parents' SUV, a rental I didn't recognize. "Looks like it," I said. "Are we late?" "We're right on time, baby." He accepted this and slipped his small hand into mine, and we walked toward the front door together. My husband Daniel a half step behind us with the wrapped gift tucked under one arm. I had known about my sister-in-law's baby shower for 2 months. Rachel was expecting her first child in March, and her mother, my mother-in-law, Patricia, had organized the celebration herself. The way Patricia organized everything, completely, thoroughly, and with a guest list that she treated like classified information. I had asked Daniel twice whether we were invited. He had told me both times that of course we were. "It's family," he said, the second time with a small laugh. Like the question itself was the strange part. What I did not know, standing at the front door of the Caldwell Lake House in my son's important jacket and my own carefully chosen green dress, was that Patricia had sent a separate message to my husband's phone 3 days earlier. A message he had not shown me, a message that said, in plain language, that the shower was meant to be intimate, close family, and that she hoped Daniel understood. Daniel had decided on his own that this message did not apply to us. He had been wrong. The door opened before I could knock. Patricia stood in the frame. She was dressed in soft ivory, her silver hair done, a champagne flute already in one hand. Behind her I could see the living room transformed. A long table of food, pink and white balloons clustered near the fireplace, a banner above the mantel, and 20 or so women in their best casual dresses, talking and laughing in clusters. "Oh," Patricia said, 1 syllable. And in that syllable, I heard everything. "We brought the gift," Daniel said from behind me, and his voice had a careful evenness to it that I recognized immediately as the voice of a man who understood he had miscalculated. Patricia's eyes moved to my son. He smiled up at her. "Hi, Grandma Pat," he said. Something crossed her face. Not warmth. Not the uncomplicated happiness of seeing your grandson. Something I would have called discomfort if I were being generous. If I were being honest, I would have called it inconvenience. "Sweetheart," she said to him, and then she looked at me. "Can I speak with you for a moment? Just you." Daniel put his hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything. Patricia stepped outside and pulled the door partly closed behind her, and we stood on the porch in the cold, with the pine smell and the muffled laughter of 20 women who did not know we were out here. "I did send Daniel a message," she said. "He mentioned. I wasn't sure if he passed it along. The shower is a little more intimate than I originally planned. Rachel specifically asked for." She paused. "She just wanted it to be the women closest to her. Her friends from home, her college roommates, and I want to respect what she asked for." I kept my voice even. "I'm her sister-in-law. I've known her for 6 years. "I know that." Patricia looked briefly past me. "And I know this isn't ideal timing, but I really think it would be better if tonight were just—" "What about him?" I said. Patricia looked at my son. He had been listening with the complete and unfiltered attention of a 6-year-old who understands that something important is happening even if he can't name what it is yet. He was still holding my hand. He was still wearing his important jacket. "I told him we were coming to celebrate the baby," I said. He made a card. He colored it himself. He picked out the gift paper. He's been asking for 2 weeks if the baby is a boy or a girl. Patricia's expression did something complex and unhappy. "I can take the card inside for him." "That's not." I stopped. Because what was I going to say? That it wasn't about the card? That it was about the fact that my son had dressed up and pressed his jacket and asked 3 times if his hair was meat because someone had let him believe he was going somewhere he was wanted? "We'll go," I said. "Sarah, please tell Rachel congratulations from us." I turned back to my son. I crouched down the way you do when you need to be at eye level, when the news is the kind that requires you to be looking directly at each other. "Hey," I said, "change of plans." He studied my face. "Are we not going in?" "Not tonight." He was quiet for a moment, doing the work of a 6-year-old processing something that doesn't make sense. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I said. And I held both his hands and I made sure my voice was steady. "You didn't do a single thing wrong, not one thing. This is a grown-up situation that has nothing to do with you. But I have the card. I know you do, and it's a beautiful card. Can we still give it to the baby when it comes?" Something in my chest pulled tight. Absolutely. 100% yes. He considered this with the seriousness of someone who had done a lot of work on that card and was deciding whether the arrangement was acceptable. "Okay," he said finally. We walked back down the porch steps to the car. I did not look back at Patricia. I did not look back at the warm windows or the pink balloons visible through the glass. I looked forward, and I kept my jaw set, and I told myself it was fine. It was fine. We would go somewhere. We would find something to do. It was fine. Daniel buckled my son into his car seat in the back. I sat in the front and looked straight through the windshield at the lake, dark and flat in the early December cold. "I should have told you about the message," Daniel said. "Yes, I thought I know what you thought." I kept my voice quiet. My son was 3 feet behind me. "We'll talk about it later." Daniel started the car. From the back seat, my son said, "Dad, does Aunt Rachel not want us there?" I turned around to look at him. He was holding the card he had made, a folded piece of construction paper with a crayon drawing on the front. A baby in a yellow blanket, surrounded by what I think were stars, though they may have been flowers. He was looking at it instead of at us. "Aunt Rachel loves you," Daniel said. "Then how come we have to leave? Grown-up stuff, buddy." He was quiet. Then, Grandma Pat looked at me weird. Daniel looked at me. I looked back at him. "Grandma Pat was just surprised to see us," I said. Which was true, technically, in the narrowest possible definition of the word surprised. My son appeared to accept this, though with the specific quality of acceptance that meant he had filed the information away for further review at a later time. He turned the card over in his hands. "The baby's going to like my card," he said. Not a question, a statement. A small act of faith maintained in the face of evidence. "The baby is going to love your card," I said. "We were 12 minutes down the road. I know because I've been watching the clock the way you do when you're trying to convince yourself you're fine, and the minutes are evidence." When my phone rang. My father-in-law, Gerald. I almost let it go to voicemail. Gerald had been at the lake house. He had presumably known we were coming, or not coming, or whatever the correct version of events was. He hadn't appeared at the door. He hadn't texted. Whatever he was calling to say, I wasn't sure I had the capacity for it right now. Daniel glanced at the screen. "You want me to?" "No," I said. "I've got it," I answered. "Sarah." His voice was different than I expected. Not awkward. Not the careful, slightly distant politeness Gerald used when he was trying to stay out of things between me and his wife. His voice was low and specific. "Where are you right now? On 7? Heading back toward town? Why? How far out are you?" "Maybe 15 minutes. "Gerald, what?" "Come back," he said. "I need you to come back to the house. I'm not going to walk back into that party, and it's not about the party." His voice was steady, with an edge under it that I had never heard before. Not anger at me. Something directed elsewhere, at something I couldn't see yet. "I need you to trust me and turn the car around. Will you do that?" I looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at me. There was something in Gerald's voice, that particular quality of a person who has been patient for a very long time and has just, quietly, decided to stop, that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Okay," I said. "We're coming back." I ended the call. "Turn around," I told Daniel. He didn't ask why. He found a place to turn and headed back the way we came. From the back seat, my son looked up from his card. "Are we going to the party now?" "We're going to see Grandpa Gerald." "Oh." He absorbed this. "Is Grandpa Gerald at the party?" "He's at the same place." "Okay," he said, and looked back at his card and carefully folded down a corner that had bent wrong. Gerald was outside when we pulled back into the lot. He wasn't on the porch. He was at the bottom of the steps, standing in the gravel with his hands in the pockets of his heavy coat. And he had the look of a man who had been waiting there long enough that the cold had stopped bothering him. I got out of the car. Daniel followed. My son scrambled out and ran directly to Gerald, the way children run to people they trust without any of the hesitation adults accumulate over years of getting it wrong. And Gerald caught him and lifted him and held him for a moment with his face pressed into my son's small shoulder. "Hey, big man," he said. He held him for a moment longer than usual. Then he set him down and looked at Daniel. "Would you take him to the dock and show him the ice on the water? I think it's started to freeze at the edges." Daniel picked at my son's hand and looked at me. I gave him a small nod. They walked toward the dock together, my son already asking at full volume whether there were fish under the ice and whether they were cold. Gerald and I stood in the gravel. The party sounds were muffled from out here. Someone was laughing. Someone clinked glasses. The warmth from the lit windows fell in long yellow rectangles across the snow. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Gerald, let me say it." He looked at me directly, and his eyes had the same quality his voice had on the phone, patient and finished. "I was in the kitchen when Patricia spoke to you on the porch. I heard all of it. I waited. I didn't come out. I told myself it was Patricia's event and I didn't want to make a scene during Rachel's shower. I told myself I would speak to Patricia privately afterward." He paused. "That was wrong. You and that little boy deserved better from me, and I'm telling you that plainly." I appreciated him saying it in the way that you appreciate an umbrella appearing after you were already soaked through. It mattered, and it also arrived too late, and both of those things were true at the same time. "There's something I need to show you," he said. He took his phone from his coat pocket and turned the screen toward me. It was an email, sent from Rachel's account to Patricia 4 days ago, before the shower, before the message to Daniel, before any of it. Gerald had been copied, though whether intentionally or by accident, I would wonder about for a long time. I read it. The subject line was, "Shower Guest List Final." The body said, "Mom, I know Daniel will probably try to bring Sarah and Owen, but I really need this to feel like my space and not like a family obligation thing. Can you just handle it on your end? Tell them it's women only or the venue changed or something. I don't care what you say. I just need one day that isn't about managing her feelings. And honestly, Owen running around will make it harder to do the games and stuff. You know how it gets." I read it twice. I read the part about managing her feelings twice. I was, in her email, a feeling to be managed, a logistical complication. I was the thing her mother needed to handle. "She planned this 4 days ago," I said. Not a question. "Yes. And your wife she just did it. She came to the door and made up whatever she needed to make up." Gerald looked at the house. "Patricia has been doing whatever Rachel asked since Rachel was about 17 years old," he said. "Tonight was not a surprise to me. It should have been, and I'm angry at myself that it wasn't." He put the phone away. "I want you to come inside. Gerald, I am not going back into that shower." "Not for the shower," he said. "There are things I should have said a long time ago, in front of everyone, and I am not interested in waiting for a better moment. Because in my experience, a better moment is just another way of saying never." He looked at me the way men look when they've stopped performing calmness and are simply calm, which is a completely different thing. "Can you trust me?" he said. I thought about my son on the drive over, asking 3 times if his hair was neat. I thought about him standing on that porch in his important jacket, asking whether he had done something wrong. I thought about him in the back seat with the card he had colored himself, deciding on his own terms that the baby was going to love it anyway. "Yes," I said. "I trust you." He nodded once and led me up the steps and pushed open the front door. The warmth hit me like a wall. Conversation, music from a small speaker on the bookshelf, the smell of food and pine candles, and the particular close air of a room full of women in a festive mood. Several heads turned when we walked in. Someone smiled vaguely. Someone else looked mildly confused. Patricia materialized from the left side of the room almost immediately, the way she always did at her own gatherings, like a property manager monitoring square footage. Her expression when she saw me went through several quick phases: surprise, alarm, composure. "Gerald," she said. The word was small and pointed and contained a full conversation. "I'd like everyone's attention for a moment. Gerald said. He didn't raise his voice. He just spoke in the voice of a person who expected to be heard, and the room, the way rooms do, responded. Conversations dropped. Conversations dropped. The music kept playing for a moment, and then someone turned it down. 20-some women looked at Gerald and at me standing beside him, and at Patricia standing across the room with her champagne flute and her gathered composure. Rachel appeared from the back hallway. She was wearing a soft pink dress, her hair loose, one hand resting on the curve of her belly. She saw me. She saw her father. Her face went very still. "Dad," she said, "what's going on?" "I'm glad you're here," he said to her. "I want you to hear this too." The room had the specific texture of a silence in which no one is quite breathing correctly. "I know about the email," Gerald said. He wasn't cruel about it. He wasn't performing. He was simply stating a fact. The way you state facts when you have decided that the time for managing them is over. "I know that you asked your mother to keep Sarah and Owen away tonight. And I know she did exactly that. I know Sarah and my grandson drove 40 minutes to be here and were turned away on the porch." Rachel opened her mouth. "I'm not finished," Gerald said quietly. Rachel closed her mouth. "I have watched this pattern for 6 years. I have watched the way this family has treated Sarah as an afterthought, and I have told myself every time that it wasn't the right moment to say something, that it would cause unnecessary tension, that people would come around on their own." He paused. "They haven't." Patricia's voice was very controlled. "Gerald, this is Rachel's day. Rachel's day has not been ruined," he said. "Her shower is still happening. Her friends are still here. Her baby is still on the way." He looked at Rachel directly. "What has happened is that your sister-in-law, who has done nothing but try to be a part of this family for 6 years, drove here tonight with her son dressed up in his best jacket holding a card he made for your baby and was told at the door that she wasn't wanted. That is what has happened." The room was absolutely still. Rachel's face had moved through something while he was talking. Defensiveness, then something harder to name. Something that looked, underneath all the other things, a little like shame. "I've also had a conversation in the last week with my financial advisor," Gerald said. "I want to be direct about this, because I think directness is something this family has been lacking for a long time." His eyes moved to Patricia. "The joint account your mother and I set up for the home renovation, the one Rachel has had access to for the last 2 years, that arrangement is ending at the end of the month." Patricia set her champagne flute down. "Gerald, additionally," he said, "the arrangement regarding the lake house, the informal understanding that it would pass to Rachel, that has not been formally documented, and I don't intend for it to be documented in the way it's been assumed." The room was the kind of quiet that has weight to it. "I'm not doing this to punish anyone," Gerald said. "I'm doing this because for the entirety of my daughter-in-law's marriage to my son, I've allowed her to be treated as a visitor in this family, and I have funded and enabled the circumstances that made that possible. I'm not willing to continue doing that." He turned to me. "I'm sorry," he said, "for tonight, for all of the other nights." I had told myself in the car and on the porch and in the gravel and again when I walked through that door that I was going to hold it together. I had a long history of holding it together. It was something I had developed into a skill over 6 years of being the daughter-in-law who was flexible, who didn't make it a thing, who smiled at Christmas and brought the right dishes and quietly rearranged her expectations to fit whatever space was being offered. I was not holding it together right now. I was not crying in a way that made a scene. I want to be specific about that. But my eyes were doing what eyes do after they have been holding pressure for a long time, and the pressure suddenly has somewhere to go. "Thank you," I said. That was all I had. It was enough. Patricia said something to Gerald in a low voice. Something about timing, about Rachel's condition, about what was appropriate. Gerald listened without interrupting and then said simply, "I know," and did not change his expression. Rachel had moved to the edge of the archway between the hallway and the living room. The women around her had very carefully found things to look at that were not her face. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't fully read, complicated, layered, the expression of a person hearing something true that they did not want to be true. She didn't say anything to me. Not then. I looked at Gerald. "Where's Daniel? Where's my son?" "Doctor," he said. "Down the hallway to the left." I went. The dock had about an inch of snow on it, and the lake beyond was starting to freeze at the edges, just as Gerald had said. String lights had been hung from the dock posts for the season, little warm points of light in the dark, Daniel was crouched at the end of the dock, with my son beside him, both of them looking at the ice shelf forming along the bank. I walked out across the snow-dusted planks. Daniel heard me and stood. He looked at my face and read it immediately, the way he always did. "Okay?" he asked. "Your dad changed the financial arrangement," I said, in front of everyone. "The house, the account." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "In front of everyone? In front of everyone?" He exhaled slowly. He looked out at the dark water. "Okay," he said. "Then I'm sorry for not telling you about the message, for thinking I could manage it." "I know! I put you in that situation. You did!" I leaned my shoulder into his. "We'll keep talking about it." From the dock, my son looked up. He had been watching the ice with complete concentration, crouched at the edge with his hands on his knees. He had somehow in the last 20 minutes acquired a stick, which he was using to test the thickness of the ice shelf. "Mom," he said, "I found where it's the most frozen." "Yeah?" "It's over there by the reeds. Dad says that's because the water moves slower there." He stood up and pointed with the stick. "When it's cold enough, I might be able to walk on it. Dad says probably by January." Dad's probably right. He accepted this and crouched back down. From inside the house, faintly, we could hear voices. Patricia's. Gerald's. Elevated, not quite arguing. The sound of a conversation that was going to take much longer than one night. My son eventually stood up and brushed the snow from the knees of his good pants, apparently satisfied with the ice survey. "Mom," he said, turning around, "can we still eat somewhere? I'm pretty hungry." "Yeah," I said. "Let's go find food." "Can I bring the stick?" "Absolutely not." He dropped the stick with total equanimity. "Okay, but I want to show the baby the dock someday, when it's older." Daniel made a quiet sound that might have been a laugh. "When the baby's old enough to walk on ice?" I asked. "Or even just to look at it," my son said generously. "Babies can look at things." "You're right," I said. "They can." We said goodbye to Gerald on the porch. He held my son for a moment and told him that the card he had made was going to go on the nursery wall, which my son received with enormous satisfaction. He shook Daniel's hand. He looked at me for a moment with eyes that were tired and resolved, and something else, something that looked, tentatively, like the beginning of a different kind of honesty. "I'll call this week," he said. "I'll answer," I said. Rachel did not come to the door. We found a diner 20 minutes down the highway, the kind with vinyl booth seats and a laminated menu in a pie case lit up next to the register. My son got pancakes with extra butter because we had agreed that unexpected changes of plan earned pancake privileges, a policy I had implemented on the spot and intended to enforce indefinitely. Daniel got the burger. I got the soup and stole half his fries because he ordered them knowing I would. We sat in that booth in the yellow diner light, the three of us, and outside the windows the December night went on around us. A truck at the gas station across the street, a couple walking a dog along the frozen sidewalk, Christmas lights in the window of the insurance office next door. My son ate his pancakes with focused, methodical happiness. He had put the card on the seat beside him so it wouldn't bend. I thought about the lake house and the pink balloons and my mother-in-law's face when she opened the door. I thought about the email. Handle it on your end. I don't care what you say. I thought about being a feeling to be managed, a logistical complication in someone else's perfect day, and sitting in that diner with my son's important jacket hung on the hook by our booth and Daniel's hand on the table near mine, and the particular ordinary warmth of a place that had no idea anything had happened and didn't need to. I felt something that wasn't quite satisfaction and wasn't quite relief. Something quieter. Something that felt, for the first time in a while, like enough. Gerald called 2 days later, as he said he would. He told me that the conversation with his financial advisor had actually started 3 weeks earlier, that he had been watching things accumulate for longer than one shower, longer than one porch conversation, that what he saw on Patricia's face when she came back inside that evening, not guilt, but something closer to annoyance at the inconvenience of consequence, was the last thing he needed to confirm what he had been privately working toward. The changes were real. He also told me something I hadn't known, that a set of my grandmother-in-law's china, a full service that had been in the family for 40 years, that I had always been told was in storage, had been quietly moved into Rachel's apartment 2 years earlier. Patricia had arranged it without telling Daniel or Gerald. When Gerald asked her about it, she said she had assumed Rachel would get more use from it. I thought about that for a while. Daniel and I drove up to have dinner with Gerald alone, without the children, without Patricia. 6 weeks later, we sat at his office building's small conference room. He had moved out of the house into a furnished apartment nearby during what everyone was politely calling a period of reflection. And he told us things he had not said before, about decisions made about Daniel's family without Daniel's knowledge, about the way my self-containment, my willingness to not make it a thing, to absorb and adjust and show up again the next time, had been used as permission to continue. He didn't perform the apology. He just described what had happened in plain language and let me respond however I needed to respond. When I got angry, sitting at that conference table with the city visible through the window behind Gerald's head, he didn't manage it. He didn't smooth it over or redirect the conversation toward reconciliation or remind me that Rachel was pregnant and stressed. He let me be angry. I'd waited a long time to be allowed to be angry without it being a problem. The china arrived by delivery 8 weeks after the shower, packed carefully, every piece wrapped in paper in a box with my name on the shipping label. No note. Just the china. Daniel helped me unwrap it piece by piece at the kitchen table. My son stood on a step stool and watched with great seriousness, occasionally handing me packing paper to put in the recycling bag. When we got to the serving platter, the large oval one with the blue rim, the one I had seen in photographs of Gerald's mother's house, my son reached out one finger and touched the edge very gently. "It's fancy," he said. "It belonged to your great-grandmother," I said. "Your dad's grandmother." He pulled his hand back. "Can we eat off it? Someday, on a special occasion?" "Is my birthday a special occasion?" "Your birthday is absolutely a special occasion." He nodded, satisfied, and handed me another sheet of packing paper. Rachel's baby was born in March. A girl. They named her June. Daniel and I sent a gift. A good one. I made sure of that, not out of performance, but because I believed in being decent, and also because June had done nothing and deserved a good gift. Rachel texted me 6 weeks after June was born. It was late on a Wednesday, which I mentioned because I have thought about the timing a lot. Late enough that I think she had drafted it several times over several days and finally just sent it before she could reconsider. It said, "I've been thinking about the shower for a long time." What I wrote in that email was not okay. I told myself it was about wanting a particular kind of day, but it wasn't really about that. "I've been unfair to you in a lot of ways I haven't wanted to look at directly. I'm not asking you to pretend none of it happened. I just needed you to know that I know." It was not a perfect text. It left out things it probably should have included and included some things that were still a little more about her comfort than my experience. But it was real, more real than I had expected from her. I sat with it for 5 days. Then I wrote back and said I appreciated her sending it. I said I wasn't ready to go back to the way things had been. I said I thought if there was going to be any kind of relationship between us, it would have to be something new, something built deliberately rather than assumed. She replied, "That's fair. I'll take whatever you're willing to give." I don't know what it becomes. I genuinely don't. There are relationships that repair themselves, and relationships that transform into something entirely different, and relationships that simply exist at a careful and respectful distance, and I can't see yet which one this will be. What I know is this. The night I stood in that gravel lot holding my son's hand while the warm lights burned inside the lake house, I thought I was arriving somewhere I wasn't welcome. I thought I was the complication, the situation to be handled, the feeling to be managed. It took me longer than it should have to understand that I had been those things for years inside that family, and that the night of Rachel's shower was only the moment it finally became impossible to ignore. My father-in-law calls every Sunday now. He and my son have a running debate about which kinds of fish live under lake ice in winter, a debate that requires periodic updates from a field guide Gerald has apparently purchased specifically for this purpose. He came to my son's school science fair in February and stood in front of the volcano project for a very long time, asking questions with what appeared to be genuine scientific interest. My son has named Gerald's apartment building Grandpa's Tower. Gerald says he's embarrassed by this. He is not embarrassed by this. Daniel, for the record, has been sitting with the weight of what he did, the message he didn't show me, the thing he decided to manage on my behalf without asking. We have talked about it more than once, and will probably talk about it more still. I am not finished being honest with him about it, and he has not asked me to be. The china is on the open shelves in our dining room now. My son walked 3 different friends past it during a play date last week, describing it as our antique famous plates, which is not quite accurate but captures something true. My son's birthday is in April. We are eating off the fancy plates. There is a version of this story where I drove home that night, put my son to bed, and quietly added it to the list of things I had learned to live with. I had a long list, 6 years long, in fact, and I had gotten good, genuinely good, at folding things up small and finding somewhere internal to put them, telling myself that keeping the peace was a form of strength. I don't think that anymore. What happened at the lake house taught me something I hadn't been willing to see, that absorbing mistreatment without naming it isn't patience. It's permission. Every time I smiled at the right moment and adjusted my expectations and showed up again the next holiday with a gift and a good attitude, I was quietly teaching everyone around me that the way they treated me was acceptable. Not because I was weak, because I was so focused on being the person who didn't make it difficult that I had forgotten to ask whether the difficulty was mine to carry in the first place. My son, in his important jacket, asking whether he had done something wrong, that was the thing that finally made the cost visible to me. Children have a way of stripping the rationalizations away. He hadn't done anything wrong. He had made a card with his own hands and dressed up and asked if his hair looked neat, and he was turned away at the door because someone found him logistically inconvenient. There is no version of that sentence that I can make acceptable, no matter how I arrange the words. The cause and effect in this story is not complicated, even when it felt that way for a long time. When people are consistently shielded from the consequences of how they treat others, they do not grow more considerate. They grow more certain that consideration is not required of them. Patricia had spent years running interference for Rachel. Rachel had spent years assuming that interference would always be there. Gerald had spent years staying quiet. I had spent years staying quiet. I had spent years accommodating. Every one of us, by our own choices, had built the structure that produced that night on the porch. And then Gerald made a different choice. That is the part I keep returning to. Not the announcement, not the financial consequences, not the public nature of it, but the fact that he simply decided at a specific moment that staying quiet was no longer something he was willing to do. He didn't wait for a better time. He understood that a better time was just another word for never. That is what real moral courage looks like, I think. Not the dramatic version, not the version where someone arrives perfectly prepared with the exactly right words. Just a person deciding that the truth is more important than the comfort of avoiding it, and then saying the thing plainly and standing in the room afterward while everyone adjusts. I want to be that kind of person, not just for myself, but for my son, who is watching everything and filing it away with that terrifying perceptiveness that children have. He is learning right now what it looks like when someone is treated unfairly and what it looks like when someone decides not to let that pass. I want him to see both clearly. I want him to know the difference. The china is on our shelves. His birthday is in April. We are using the fancy plates. Some things, it turns out, were always ours. We just had to stop pretending otherwise long enough to bring them home.